All right, so here are 15 sludge and post metal albums you might have missed in 2022. These are more picked towards things that are either more my taste or just didn't make it past a certain point where I'd want to review it. Up front, I'm not the biggest fan of sludge and post metal these days. I find a lot of it redundant and uncreative. A lot of it depends too much on filling space rather than song ideas. And I know, you'll see that in some of my favorites of the year. I think UFO Mammoth, Cult of Luna, these are memorable and notable bands that put a lot into their songwriting and have a lot, have something to say. Um, Not to say that everything else on this list isn't that profound, but that most people might have missed them because they were on smaller labels or whatnot. Um, so we'll skip past some of these if just so you can read it through them yourself. But I'll talk about some of these, starting with Gavran, which is a Netherlands-based sludge doom metal band who they have like a little bit of early pallbearer in their sound. It is very much like a what I would consider a post doom metal band, which relies on softer textures but bigger riffs, and it's very much an atmospheric sludge feeling, but without any of the grotesque confrontation that comes with that style of music. So it's sludge adjacent, and you'll find that the deeper you get into the record, but it starts out sounding like a modern, like psychedelic or atmospheric doom metal record. And you know, if you liked a Destroyer of Lights record from this year, you'll probably like what they start out with. But this band definitely goes in more of a sludgier direction as they continue on. Um, Whereas Fohammer have they've sort of turned even more towards the death doom side of things. As the main guy, it's a Virginia-based band. It's a duo, and the main guy has picked up drummer and I think producer on this record, or at least the engineer, Ben Price of At the Graves, who I've featured on the site a few times for that band. And yeah, this record is absolutely great. Think of like winter heaviness, like the like almost an old school Death Doom kind of approach that has some of the hairiness of like a Moss or a Colt Blood and that kind of thing, Colt's Blood, where uh, there's just a it's definitely a sludge metal adjacent kind of thing, but the death doom is so effective here, and uh, the obvious sort of point to pick up is probably corrupted or that kind of thing, but there's a real uh, quality here that I just wasn't expecting. It's just a very fine sort of sludge slash death slash doom kind of record that I probably should have picked up earlier and reviewed because I liked it so much while I was writing this. I was like, fuck, I shouldn't have put this on the list. But it is, that's probably the best thing on this list here. So you could just cut it off right now and go listen to that. But we have a Polish sludge metal band here. Somewhere, so this band has, they have sort of a stoner sludge rockish feeling to some of their pieces, but then most of it is pretty standard post metal you'd expect out of Poland these days. Um, Very refined, really have a good grasp of the dynamic of what they're doing. But it stuck in mind because it was adventurous and not because it was the songwriting was so impressive. And I think you'll find it's fairly similar to some of the other projects they've been involved in. So it was just all right for me. It's still a good record and a memorable one. But if you don't have any of those references, maybe it'll be more impressive just because you haven't heard this sound exactly. But very good, very professional sounding, atmospheric sludge metal record, that kind of thing. Uh, Orthodox's Proceed is this is a long running Spanish sludge doom metal band who began. I think they experimented quite a lot more with drone. earlier on. And this is almost a more straightforward album from them, although they do venture around with guitar textures and atmospheric sections. And the way I describe it here is there's a little bit of Sleep's earlier, more experimental side, and something like 90s Neurosis almost. So, except not as staggered. You know, the rhythm of Sleep is probably more keen to what they're doing here. But anyway, I mean, it's a good medium for someone who likes like modern psychedelic doom metal and stoner sludge, but wants something a little bit more considered, a little edgier, and uh, without the sort of more improvisational side of the band, which you'll find more in their other project Pilar. So check that out too. Um, Hegemony, however you want to pronounce that, as another Polish band uh, who, like they, how can I put this? They really marry the relevant comorbidities of atmospheric black metal, post black metal, if you will, and post metal. And now, obviously, like, so the black metal will overtake post metal in terms of personality and guitar progressions. That's sort of just a natural inevitability of the combination. But I think they make a particularly fine case for themselves throughout this album. And I think through like unique vocals, um, a little bit of dissonance, and just a fine quality recording. You're going to find good production on most post metal records these days, but uh, this stands out because they've still worked in the black metal side of things in a clean crossover. So these things work together seamlessly. They're not separate black metal section, separate post metal section, doom, whatever you else you want to fit in there. But um, it's it's characterizing in a way. I think this is their second album, and they've definitely improved quite a bit in terms of performance and production values, and it really made this one stand out. Uh, Until We Rest Beneath the Winterway is Earthrise. That is Earthrise's second album, and it comes after about 10 years, and they've they've developed their sound considerably. They put a lot of time and effort into this record, and that shows. It's a huge double LP, full 72 minutes. I think it's a little bit too much for the story that they're telling. Uh, I get that it's a big epic and they want to put all this into it. I don't know that it needed to be so long to tell its story. And I don't want to discount any of the work that went into it. I think it is a very good record, but I found it just didn't justify an hour and 12 minutes of sitting with it because the major dynamic of the record really is set into place in the first 18 or 20 so minutes or on those first two songs. And then they just kind of iterate on it for the sake of telling the complete story. And I won't get into all that. You can read a little bit more about it yourself and listen to the album yourself to dig into it. But I like the idea. I just didn't feel like the music, the theme, and the art direction all worked together and made sense to start out. So, uh, I still gave it a fairly high rating, but I feel like it just didn't all come together as profoundly as they might have wanted it to. So, still, it might be very much your thing. If you're interested in progressive sludge metal, atmospheric sludge, space, modern ideas on space rock and post-hardcore, there's a lot of all that in there. Like, if you like the last couple Mountaineer records, if you like Rosetta, uh, the softer side of the band is very much in that vein, and the heavier side of the band is still related to like the history of atmospheric sludge and the juxtaposition of the violent and the and the easygoing. So uh, that's worth checking out. I'm just less of, like I said, I'm less of a fan of post metal as I used to be. So it's harder to like really get me there. Um, Abraham is a little bit more along the lines of what I enjoy. Debris de Mon Perdu is it follows up a similar, like their previous record was like it was a quadruple LP, which seems like a lot, but it was at a certain RPM. I was at 40, I think it was at 45. So it, it was only a couple of hours, but uh, it was too much, and they were trying to do too much. And now they've a couple of members have left. They've turned towards heavier, more dissonant guitars, uh, focused more on just one vocalist who is more brusque and more violent with his work. And there's some unique, clean vocals here, which generally provide a lot of the hooks and more interesting sentiment on the album. It is sort of a post-hardcore influenced post-metal album in truth, but it should appeal to folks who like classic atmospheric sludge metal before people started calling it post-metal. Um, so moving towards a little bit more traditional or stoner sludge side of things, Siam is just a great band that came from a formerly French and now French Canadian group. This is a trio, and Blueberry Cash is just their latest EP, following up their pretty good debut LP, Winterized, a couple years ago. Uh, I don't know. There's a lot of gimmicky stuff going on in terms of their promotion. They put out a hot sauce. They sold rolling papers, stash boxes, weed grinders, all that stuff. Who cares? It's just a great band, um, and one that keeps it pretty simple. Drums, bass, some guy yelling, and the sort of grooves of sludge metal that the New Orleans style sludge is a big proponent of what they do, and you'll get it the minute you hit play on the song, and it carries through the EP. It's a very quick listen. Uh, on a similar note, Tons latest record has Engine. It's a Italian sludge doom metal band who are they have a unique rasped kind of goblin sounding vocalist. They are don't seem all that serious based on the cover art and all that. But this is still a mean record. It's not a goofy, happy, fun record. I don't know what they're singing about, but there's a good chance it's about weed. And it's like over the top. It's heavy. It's pretty interesting. I didn't have much to write about it, but I had a good time with the record. It takes me back to like kind of mid '90s sludge, kind of before like the Bongzilla kind of stuff really took off, and it was more like buzz oven weirdness, that kind of thing. That kind of my reference for that. Um, and actually, Negative 13 aren't that far off from that idea. They're sort of a stoner sludge metal band that incorporates some '90s hardcore influences into their work. Um, this being probably their best work to date. If you're a fan of 16, I think this record in particular will appeal to you. Well, especially earlier 16. Again, going back to like Buzz Oven and those kind of bands, and how 16 kind of rose out of that kind of sound. This will be your thing if you're into that, and grew up with like Relapse and all those labels curating what you're interested in. Uh, Britov, a Slovenian band, are very much on a different note. Um, let's call this like a sludge stoner rock slash kind of Motorhead-ish speed heavy metal kind of thing. And like, what the fuck am I talking about? Well, if you've heard Saviors, Black Wizard, and more recently Green King, this is kind of along those lines. Maybe a little bit less serious, but maybe a little bit more heavy metal at the same time. Pretty good record. Now, Morrow is it's definitely a neo crust album that has a lot of influences from atmospheric sludge, doom, and really big grand pieces, which has kind of led to it being considered a sludge band to some people. Think of it like, I don't know, if Nausea and Agramonia got together and made a record, I don't know how else to put it. Uh, I listened to this a number of times. I'm a big fan of it, but at some point it got a little bit goofy for me. I think it's very dramatic, and the sort of neocrust and emo side of things kind of kills off my interest in the grand dramatism of it all. But I think a lot of people will enjoy it, um, who are into that kind of thing. Griefbringer is a little bit more up along my more in my style that I enjoy, and it's more of a doom slash sludge metal band who are influenced by traditional doom metal. You'll hear some of the sort of Candlemass esque cadence to their work. Most of it comes pretty harsh and loud, but you'll feel the sludge in that regard. Not much to say about it. I think it's a great record, but it's very single-minded, very down the corridor of their sort of similar song ideas and tone throughout. They could diversify it a bit, but overall, it's a pretty fine example of a debut. Um, so then from there we get into more typical, what I would consider more typical sort of atmospheric sludge slash post metal releases that are not that exceptional from my point of view. If you want something a little bit bonkers, which I've related to Haste or Breach style post hardcore and a little bit of 90s Neurosis, and all those things had dual vocals that interrupted each other quite a bit, but also want a little bit of post black metal in there. I think there's a lot of cool things to enjoy on Ofernot's latest record, All Colors Retract. Um, it's there's an exuberance to it that I really appreciate. There's a darkness that I really appreciate. It's kind of all over the place. It's kind of a salad of ideas, but it all makes sense, both looking, past precedents and modern ideas. I don't think it all comes together that well, but it does beg to be noticed as you listen to it, and it will probably catch some ears. It might just be annoying as shit to others because of the dual vocals. Um, and On Who and Monument are kind of on a similar tip, but almost not at all in terms of creating anything even slightly abrasive. They've There's like an ASMR element to the opening song in here that I just hated, and I just couldn't get past it for the longest time. And then I finally went and listened to the rest of the album, and it's pretty good. There's some sort of post black metal, sleepier, post doom fluffiness to it, and it's all a pretty interesting kind of background music listen, if I'm being honest. And that's not a bad thing. But yeah, I was more just interested in sharing these records with people who are more inclined towards them, even if they're not all to my taste. So don't take that as like an official review or anything. I'm just saying you might have missed these records. Most of them are pretty good. And, thanks for checking them out.